This is apropos. Amnesty International is expressing concern as Burkina Faso becomes the latest African nation to criminalise same-sex relations. The rights group describing the move as an alarming setback. Unelected lawmakers have this week unanimously adopted a draft family code making homosexual acts punishable by up to 5 years in prison. With details, here's James Vazina.
The government says it's an effort to modernise laws, but LGBT organisations will be viewing it as another step back for people's rights on the continent. Fines and prison sentences await anybody engaging in or promoting homosexual or transgender activity, after Burkina Faso's junta passed legislation outlawing LGBT practices. A law that was passed unanimously on Monday by Burkina Faso's transitional parliament.
A person who engages in homosexual practices will appear before a judge and, in the event of a repeat offence, be deported if you are not a Burkinabe national.
The move comes less than a year after the country's neighbouring ally, Mali, which is also ruled by a military junta, adopted a law criminalising homosexuality. Ghana and Uganda have also recently toughened their laws. And while same-sex relationships are outlawed in around a third of the world's countries, a large number of African nations remain particularly hostile. This map charts an equality index, measuring the current laws and public attitudes towards LGBT people. The higher the number, the more friendly the country is deemed to be. In some countries, anti-LGBT laws date from the colonial era, while in others, a religious resurgence has seen a growth in anti-gay opinions and laws. Over half of Africa's 54 countries criminalise same-sex activity, and the relaxing of laws in some has been met with demonstrations, such as here in Namibia and in Kenya. Cape Verde and South Africa are by large deemed the friendliest. South Africans became the first on the continent to be allowed to marry people of the same sex in 2006.
To discuss, we're joined now from Ghana by human rights advocate Robert Akoto Amoafo from the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans and Intersex Association. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme. As we say, Burkina Faso becoming the latest African nation to criminalise same-sex relations. Why, in your view, is this happening now?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And this is sad news to come by, but it's not surprising. As you may be aware, recently we have received a lot of interest by anti-rights groups in Africa, increasing their activities and encouraging our state laws houses to pass such laws. Of course, as you may be aware, from 2013, they have increased their activities, starting from Uganda, Ghana, Kenya, even in Francophone countries where we see a number of Francophone countries that did not have laws that criminalize LGBT people. So this is not surprising, but it is worrying that this trend keeps increasing and making LGBT people look like the butts of the joke, which means that LGBT people are always criminalized and used as scapegoats for a number of these laws that are passed, especially around family.
Talk to us a little bit then about the kind of effects that these laws are having on people. Rights groups reporting that the LGBT community is dealing with arbitrary arrests in certain countries and detention and just general discrimination.
Exactly. And most of the times when we talk about these laws, one of the key things is the violence that happens to LGBT people because of the existence of this law. Violence by non-state actors, when people take the law into their own hands because they know there's an existing law that criminalizes LGBT people, then they're able to harm them further and go without being punished. There are a number of cases where LGBT people have been killed, have been beaten in various countries, and they've gone scot-free because there are laws that that are against LGBT people. Also, discrimination in health services. A lot of these laws only do not criminalize LGBT people, but people who try in any way to support LGBT people. So, for instance, in this law, it talks about promoting, which means that anyone who does anything, and because the meaning is so vague, it could help, it could make LGBT health workers reduce their services to LGBT people if they are found to be LGBT or suspected to be LGBT. In schools, LGBT people who are already known or suspected to be LGBT may be expelled or may be discriminated against or to made feel uncomfortable and may have to leave school. Economic-wise, in their jobs, they are going to be thrown out of school, especially effeminate or people who exhibit tendencies of when people may look at it as LGBT or being gay or being lesbian. So these are the main impacts that it has on LGBT people, having impact on their lives, their existence, their identity as human beings.
And Robert, do these laws reflect, do you think, societal shifts and a hardening of attitudes, or are political leaders kind of using this issue to score political points?
Yes. Political people are using this to score political points, as exactly as you mentioned. In many countries, we observe that whenever it is time for elections, many of these political parties use this as a scorecard to motivate voters to get votes. In Ghana, it's happened, in Kenya, and in many other countries. And for many, many reasons, LGBT people are used as, like I mentioned, the part of the joke, which means that either they are used as a scorecard to get into various spaces, or they are used as a means to show morality. And this has been a very serious issue against LGBT people. And it's not only religious political leaders that use this, but also religious leaders and various leaders who want to have their way in so many areas. So LGBT people in Africa now have become like the place to go to when you want to get fame, or you want to get popular, or you want to show that you are being a savior of the masses. And this has been the effect of these things on LGBT people in Africa.
And those people as well in African countries, particularly like Uganda, we hear reports that they're, being affected by Donald Trump's move to dismantle the US Agency for International Development. How has that been impacting LGBT people, not just in Uganda, but across Africa?
As you may be aware, a lot of the funding that comes to Africa to support healthcare comes from some of these fundings that have been cut by the Trump administration. USAID used to fund, and interestingly, it's not only LGBT people, but a broader sense of a number of health issues that have been stopped, but effectively on LGBT people, because a number of the medications, the access to safe spaces, and the work that LGBT organizations used to do on the continent were funded by some of these funding that used to come to support the work that we do, advocacy, to support support poor LGBT people who are being harassed. And then many times we say that these laws, when they are passed, do not affect greatly people who are protected because of their ability to afford a number of things. The poor LGBT people who live in spaces where they do not have agency are the people who suffer the most, because they have a number of people on their neck. I always give an example of people who live in a communal area who don't have their privacy. They are the people who, if you look at check the statistics on violence, they are the people affected. So this law is not only the fact that it's affecting LGBT people, but poor LGBT people who cannot speak for themselves, who cannot do anything for themselves because of the instance of poverty. And this cutting of funding affects a number of things that the LGBT community could have access to protect themselves from laws and violence as it exists against the community.
Okay, Robert, we'll have to leave it there for now. We're out of time on that, but thanks so much for being with us on the programme. That is human rights advocate Robert Amoafo joining us live there from Ghana.